Ashes and dust. The man who entered the small room was a stiletto wrapped in a comfy sweater. His long, dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, but threads of silver were woven through that black mane. His slacks hung from narrow hips, and his long-fingered hands made one think of a pianist or a surgeon. While he had a smile on his lips, he was careful not to show his teeth when he did it. His eyes were kind in their way, but it was how he moved that gave the game away. He walked like a pair of scissors, every sharp step threatening in a way you could feel, but couldn't quite put words to. His name was John Promise, and he had come to archive Shelley's personal hell. He began with an apology, asking her if she needed anything before they began. Something to eat, a cup of tea, or anything like that. Shelley shook her head, the old scars along her neck sending pulses of lightning through her muscles. She told him she'd rather just get it over with. John had smiled at that, enough that a silver flash of his teeth was visible for just a moment. He laid his leather-bound notebook on the table between them and opened to a fresh, clean sheet. He uncapped his pen, made note of the date, the time, and Shelley's name and details. Then he asked his questions. He spoke clearly, calmly, and he enunciated every word. It didn't matter how soft his turn of phrase was, though, because every query was a blade that peeled back Shelley's skin one layer at a time. He asked about the place she'd come from, and she tried to dig through the broken glass memories to find an acceptable answer. She spit out names like the Breaking Fields and Trenchertown, but the shards were too jagged for her mind to really grab hold of. He asked her about other people who were taken with her, and she felt half-familiar names on her tongue, like shards of bloody, broken teeth. There had been a one-eyed black wolf named Kerrigan who hadn't lost his voice yet. She'd seen eyes in the fireplace and heard a voice that spoke in the pops of crackling wood that had called itself Johnny Candles. She'd heard tell of something named Darius that lived in the darkness under a bridge. She'd never laid her eyes on it, but she'd felt its gaze heavy on her back when she'd made her run for the sun. The questions kept coming, one after another, followed by the scratching of his pen and the occasional papery sigh as he turned to a new page. His expression never changed. Not when she gritted her teeth and clenched her fists. Not when she felt herself tear up. He just wrote it all down, and when he'd finished, peeled back another layer of her with the same apologetic look in his eyes. And when he'd asked her everything she thought he could, and it was almost over, he sunk the dagger and twisted it. "Tell me about the one who kept you," he said. It was not a question. Shelley shook her head back and forth in silent denial. John Promise simply waited, his hand poised above the page. A drop of dark ink oozed along the nib like blood, gathering for a pregnant eternity before it fell to the page with a soft, wet plop. He watched her with those kind eyes, but he did nothing to pull the knife out of her. The silence dragged on, and as it did, Shelley found words bubbling up her throat and slipping through her lips like vomit. She remembered fire. She remembered a hateful sun that stared down from a bleach-boned sky and a weight on her shoulders that bore her down into the muck. Names tumbled from her tongue as she tore breath into her lungs, the words beginning to run together like melted wax. The Flame Usurper, King of Broken Shadows, the Burning Eye, the Ashen Lord. Shelley tasted blood in her mouth as she spat the words onto the tabletop, drool running over her bottom lip as her muscles buckled and shook. Finally, the spasm passed, and she was left panting in the darkness behind her closed eyes. All she could hear was the scratching of that goddamn pen on paper. Then it stopped. A moment later, she heard the pages whisper before they were shushed by the quiet weight of the cover being closed. She opened her watering eyes and saw John Promise tucking the book away in an inside pocket of his old jacket. He stood without ceremony and made his way to the door. Shelley made a noise, an inquisitive sob that asked a dozen questions. Is it over? Am I safe? Why did you do this to me? The sharp-edged scarecrow turned back and looked at her for a moment. There was regret in his gaze, but no apology. There was no more sorrow in him for what had happened than a doctor would have had for the operation to cut a tumor out of someone. We had to know, he said. Then after a moment, he elaborated. The titles matter. The names matter. If we know them, we can turn them into weapons. John Promise waited to see if understanding dawned on Shelley's face. She just stared back at him with her empty, hollowed-out eyes. She tried to swallow, but her throat felt like it was full of grinding gravel. Shelley coughed, gritting her teeth as her ribcage clenched. She felt cool, dry fingers on her arm. The long man squeezed gently before giving her a reassuring pat. They hide behind many faces, and they call themselves many things, he said. Every lie we can strip from them is one less place for them to hide. Sooner or later, there won't be any shadows left. His footsteps rang on the tiled floor, and he opened the locked vault door. He held it, waiting for her. Shelley stood on unsteady legs and walked out of the empty, inhospitable room. In that moment, she wondered if the world she'd tried so hard to run away to was really so much better than the one she'd fled from. Thank you for staying to the end of this story. Ashes and Dust is the introductory story to the Changeling The Lost supplement, Like a Good Neighbor, portraying the True Fae in Your Chronicle. The most recent release we've had for the Chronicles of Darkness, this marks a return to Changeling The Lost, and possibly a return to the wider setting. If you find this story interesting, and if you'd like to know more about Shelley, John Promise, and the terrible, terrible beings they fled from to make their way back to reality, then consider picking up a copy of the book, linked in the description below, and give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Who knows what might be coming next?